Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. On the island, that's how many debut authors feel at times. Whether it's stranded struggling with their first novel, or once they finish it, often writers find themselves equally stuck trying to strategize a way to get their story before readers. New York Times best-selling author Tracey Garves faced just this scenario when she made the bold decision to self-publish her first novel over a decade ago. 370,000 copies later, she knew the gamble had paid off and has been adding to her fans' bookshelves and Kindles ever since, with subsequent hits like the sequel Uncharted and a string of standalone hits like Covet, Every Time I Think of You, The Girl He Used to Know, where Cosmopolitan, ahead of its highly anticipated release, promised that there's a lot of romantic books coming out, but none quite like this one. The Kate and Ian duet with Heart-Shaped Hack and White Hot Hack, and Heard It All in a Love Song most recently, where Publishers Weekly reported, the Graves has a sure hand with depicting the complexity of dating after divorce. This will please readers looking for a realistic spin on taking a second chance at love. Just out in paperback, she's here today to talk all about her unique rise to the top as a bestseller. Tracey, welcome to the show. Turning back to childhood, do you remember first discovering your lifelong love of books at a very young age?
I was just a voracious reader. I was one of those nerdy kids that always had her nose in a book. The school library, I would hang out in the school library and go through weird phases where I would read like all of the biographies of famous females in history. I'd get kind of in like these grooves where I'd want to read all about that. And so that's kind of how I guess that was my first introduction to storytelling, is just reading the storytelling of other people. And then that's probably where the seed was planted.
Now, we understand you were actually already sending off your own original stories to Reader's Digest while still in fifth grade?
I have a slightly embarrassing anecdote. I usually tell people that back in the day, Reader's Digest used to have contests and submission guidelines where you could submit things. And so I tried to do a couple writers or Reader's Digest submissions that surprisingly went nowhere. I never heard from anybody there. And then another thing that I used to do is I used to love Stephen King. I still love Stephen King, but my dad gave me a copy of The Stand that I still have to this day, back in probably 1978, 79. I was not old enough to be reading it, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he just bought it because it was on an end cap somewhere and he knew his daughter liked to read. And so for a while, I kind of wanted to emulate his writing style. I think all writers go through that phase where they're just trying to kind of emulate somebody else until they figure out how to do it with their own voice and their own way of telling a story.
Hasn't Stephen King made that same impression on just about every author over the last 60 years who put pen to paper? Who else made early impressions on you with their work?
Night Shift was one of my early books too, because all of those short stories, especially The Long Walk, which I think they're making now into a full-length movie, which that story traumatized me. So I will not be watching that one. That is one where I do not want to watch the movie version. It was hard enough to read the short story, but yeah, my fond memories of being, in middle school and high school have Stephen King books all through them. So high school is when things really expanded for me, and I probably left my Stephen King phase and went into my Jackie Collins and Sidney Sheldon, and just the commercial fiction bestsellers of the time. And the only way I came across them is if I was actually browsing in a bookstore, like at the mall, or if somebody brought it to my attention. We didn't have all of these lists back then and all of these, all the social media. So I had to discover books the old-fashioned way by being in the vicinity of a bookstore, somebody telling me about the book, going into a Target. I bought a lot of my books really as a young adult and into my adulthood. Target trade paperbacks were where I would get introduced to a lot of new to me authors. So that's pretty much what I would do to find books.
Did you find yourself writing any original short stories or lengthier work of your own back then?
Other than just little things that I wrote in my room when I was pretending to be like Stephen King, I never showed anybody any of that work. I really didn't start dabbling in my own creative writing until I got to college and took I'm a business major. I have a business degree, but I ended up taking electives because I had to choose electives, and fiction writing was the elective I chose first, and then I would choose that anytime I could. So it wasn't until college that I started writing. I had a great teacher who she saw something in my writing, which is funny because I have all of the work that I had done for that class, and I'm not somebody who's nostalgic or I'm not a keeper. I get rid of things. I don't keep a lot of stuff like that. But I kept all of that because she had written a note on one of the short stories that I turned in that said, I think if you work hard, I could really see you being published someday. And so I really glommed onto that. I mean, I kept that in the back of my head, but it would be a good, gosh, 20 years almost before I would actually start writing. I've never forgotten it. I didn't, it meant more to me later as I actually started to embark on trying to get published, that I kept going back to that and thinking, well, she saw something and now you're ready to try and do this. So let's see if anybody else can see it.
Once you did reach that point, did you amass the usual proverbial drawer of unpublished works on the way to arriving on the island, which Booklist correctly called your breakout hit, and impressed Kirkus Reviews enough to declare you the patron saint of independent authors? Please take fans back inside this truly inspiring story of how this first one took flight first in your imagination and then up the bestseller charts.
I have that drawer now and it has some manuscripts in it, but back then I had nothing. I had returned to the workforce. I'd been a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. And then when my youngest started elementary school, I went back to work. And I should have worked on trying to write a novel when I was still at home with the kids, but I didn't have much time then either. And I didn't have a lot once I went back to work. But I started thinking about what it would be like to write a book. And it was kind of a bucket list item. I just kept thinking to myself, gosh, if you're going to do this, you need to do this. You need to get going on it. I was in my mid 40s at that point. And so I thought, if you're going to do it, you should do it now. And so I just decided I would attempt to write a novel, an actual novel, not, oh yeah, I wrote a novel, but nobody's ever going to see it and it's in a drawer and it's hidden and I can't show it to you. I wanted to write something that I could actually have tangible physical proof that I had crossed that item off my bucket list. And so I had several different ideas that I was kind of contemplating writing. And this one idea that later became On the Island just would not be quiet. It just kept getting louder and louder. And it was so bananas. And I thought it was such a strange idea, and that I certainly can't write this idea. People will think there's something wrong with me, because it does deal with an age gap, and it deals with two people stranded on a desert island who should never, ever be together. It was kind of my version of Castaway if there had been somebody on the island with Tom Hanks other than a volleyball. And so I just decided I would write it. I didn't have anything to lose, and nobody was ever going to read it. So who cares? I mean, nobody was going to publicly read it. I'd show it to people. I'd actually have something I could hold in my hands. I would have completed a full-length novel, but it's never going to go anywhere. And so I wrote it. I wrote it from a place of absolute creative freedom. And I think that is something that I've been trying to get back to ever since. Well, I was rejected by every single agent I queried. I had a 100% rejection rate. I did not have a single agent request a partial or a full. They didn't want to read it at all. They literally did not want me to send it. I got a series of very, very nice, professional, but polite, no thank you, this is not for us, just form rejections like I was prepared to receive. But what I hadn't been prepared for is to receive 100% rejection. I thought maybe an editor, or an agent would, even out of just curiosity, sure, send me the first 25 pages or first 50 pages. But we all know publishing doesn't really work like that. They're busy, they're inundated with queries in the slush pile. So I was dead in the water. I was crushed, because somewhere along the way, the book became a bucket list goal item, and it turned into, I want to share this story. I want to get this story out there. I want to do this for a living. I want to write novels. I want to have an agent. I want to have an editor at a publishing house. It was Big Six back then. It's Big Five now, but that's what I wanted to do. I did not want to self-publish. And that was really, at that point, the only option I had left. I did not want to do that. I did not want to go that route. But I thought about it for a while, and I had some really good advice from people in my inner circle, including my critique partner, who basically just said, you can self-publish it and maybe find a few more readers, or you can just, put it in that drawer and write something else. And so I was kind of torn. I thought about it a little bit longer. And then I decided, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I was still working my day job, and I had already started thinking about my next book. And so I, at that point, via Twitter, started researching freelance editors. And so I found a freelance developmental editor and was petrified because I'd had quite a few beta readers and just people that I had let read the novel. And the feedback was very overwhelmingly positive, but these were all people that knew me. And so I thought, okay, well, here's the proof. We're going to see if this has any viability at all. And she really liked it. She she was, I think, surprised, as some readers ended up being down the line when they, you first hear the premise and it's kind of off-putting. And she said, I really want these two characters to be together. I just kind of fell in love with them. And so that was really encouraging. And then after that, I found my cover art, and I found a copy editor to do the line edits for me. I found a formatter to format the manuscript, and I did everything that a traditional publisher does when you're hired, or when your book is sold, and they are essentially hiring you to be their author for this book or books or whatever deal you end up sending or signing. So I self-published it on September 4th of 2011, and I felt really good. I had not wanted to go that route, but I felt really good that it was out there in the universe. And I had reached my goal. At this point in time, it's out there. I did what I set out to do, and then I just got busy writing the next one. I have a very interesting story because I really had to go about it. I had to kind of come in the back door. And self-publishing, being in kind of the gold rush years at the time that I was entering the marketplace, I had a really good timing. The timing worked really well. I self-published, and there was a lot of demand for self-published novels. They were starting to become more prevalent. The quality had, of course, gotten better. And with the digital platforms making it so much easier, it was a really viable option. And I'm glad I ended up taking it, even though that's not what I had set out to do. So the book it came out in September, and by January was selling about 100 copies a day, and I couldn't have been happier. I was absolutely thrilled with that. I had started to receive messages from people who didn't even live in the United States, who had found the book and would write to me or send me a tweet on Twitter or something. And I thought to myself, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. These people don't even live in my country, and they're reading the book, and then they're reaching out to tell me. And I was starting to get a lot of messages like that, and things were just going really, really well. I thought, this is really fun. I mean, it was probably the most joyous period of time in my life ever. And so in early March, I got an email from Amazon, and I thought it was the Amazon that I buy my toilet paper and paper towels on, and it was like with one of my orders or something, but it was Amazon from Kindle Direct Publishing. Amazon. They were reaching out directly to me, and they said, we've been watching your book. We've been watching your reviews and your rank, and we are contemplating including you in an upcoming sale called The Big Deal. And this was this was early 2012, March of 2012. And this was back when Amazon had like one Kindle Daily Deal book of the day. And that's it. It was, they didn't have all the sales that are now prevalent on a daily basis. This was, kind of back in the one Kindle Daily Deal book. And so they were going to do a bigger sale. They were going to have 200 titles. They were all going to be discounted. They couldn't tell me if I'd be chosen for sure, but I had to respond to the email with specific verbiage and sign my name and say that, yes, I would be, okay with this sale. And so on the morning of March 17th, I woke up and, like I did every morning, checked my rank on Amazon to see where I was at and if any new reviews had come in, and the stuff that I no longer do because I have more books and not enough time. But back then, that was very exciting to me. And I noticed that my book had been discounted from the ebook price of $2.99 to 99 cents. So I knew I was in. I was like, and there was a big header on the listing for the book saying The Big Deal sale. So I was like, oh, I got in, they chose the book. And I thought that could be really incredible, because being a successful author is as much about being able to reach your target readers as it is about writing a really good book that your target readers will connect with and enjoy. We still have to find them. It's a very saturated marketplace. And I thought this could end up being really, really good for the book. And it ended up being better than I had ever anticipated it would be for the book, because it was a 10-day sale. And at the end of the 10 days, my book was at number 8 on the Amazon top 10. So it was behind the Hunger Games trilogy and the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy, and then a Nicholas Sparks book, and then me. And that blew my mind. That was, again, I thought that life cannot get any better than it is right now. This is the coolest thing I have ever seen. Of course, I told all my friends and family. It's in the top 10 on Amazon. And I thought, well, the sale ends tomorrow. It'll probably just, kind of fade back. And the cool thing that happened is that it didn't. It stayed in the top 10 for the next 2 months. And so that just really kind of kicked the door wide open. And that snowball of word of mouth that had already started rolling downhill just picked up more speed and more speed. And it was really an organic, true word of mouth book, because I had, at that point in time, I had a Twitter, Instagram wasn't a thing. I had an author Facebook page with like 100 likes, maybe 150, and I did have a website, but that was about it. I didn't do much more than that. It sold about 360,000 copies.
What beyond the commercial were any of the greatest creative lessons that you learned on this maiden voyage into writing, so to speak?
It was important for me that I write a book that had good character development, and writing on the island probably taught me more about character development than any of my other titles, because of the age gap and wanting it to be handled in a way that would not come across as outrageous or titillating or anything that was just, I didn't want it to be this over the top. I wanted to show, kind of like Tom Hanks in That Volleyball, how you can develop real, genuine, authentic, strong feelings of attachment and love and friendship and companionship to something, because that's all you have. And so Anna and TJ only had each other, and I wanted to make the aspects of being stranded in this form as authentic as I could possibly make them. I mean, if you're literally on a desert island and no hope of survival or rescue, you're going to have to come up with a new world. You're going to have to build a new world for yourself. So as I was building the world for Anna and TJ, that was always in the back of my mind the whole time. How do I craft a story so that not only will readers not be put off by the age gap, by the end of the book, they will be rooting for these two people to find their happily ever after and find a way that they can make their relationship work with all of the obstacles that were already in the way. So I've tried to do that with the rest of my work, because all of my work fits within the contemporary fiction with a happily ever after umbrella. Everything I write is kind of a mashup of women's fiction and romance, in that I have a strong heroine's journey, but I always want there to be a happily ever after and a romantic relationship at the end of the book. So really, I mean, I learned everything I could possibly learn about fiction writing that book. And when I get asked for advice from people, well, I want to write a book, I don't know how to do it, what do I do? And I tell them the same thing I had to tell myself. The only way to learn how to write a novel is to write a novel. You will not know what you're doing. It'll be frustrating and you'll hate it at times, but you'll have to figure it out as you go along. And then once you've done it, then you've done it. Then you can do it again.
Heard It in a Love Song impressively had a 75,000 copy run first printing and just came out in paperback, reflecting your loyal longtime fan base and its ever-growing expansion as the 2020s roll on with new titles like this one, where Publishers Weekly observed that Garves is such a sure hand with depicting the complexity of dating after divorce. This will please readers looking for a realistic spin on taking a second chance at love. When did Layla Hilling start singing her story in your head and lead you to start writing? What Pop Sugar promised readers is the beautiful but simple message that it's never too late to start over.
Honestly, I just wanted to write a book about a woman who had not been in a particularly great marriage and had given up certain things to marry the guy that she was in love with at the time, that she felt like, it was a great relationship. But as the relationship went on, and it revealed itself to be not as good as she hoped it would be, and she had to then start letting go of her music that had been so important to her. Because I feel like I write books about strong women for men and women, but I do have a large female audience. And I just thought that it would be really neat to see a woman take back all of the things that she had let go of. She was divorced, which had been a hard thing for her to go through, but it was now kind of like a blank slate that she was left with. And what did she want it to look like? And so she decided that the music would be the obvious place to pick back up with, and she derived a lot of comfort and joy and happiness about creating again. And I guess for someone like me who's also a creative, if I can't write, I get real antsy. I don't know what I always have to have something to be working on. It just makes me feel calm if I know that I've got a creative project to go back to. And so I kind of tried to pour those feelings into Layla and how she felt when she was starting to rediscover, because she was really good at it. She and also I talk a little bit in the book, and I like to highlight a little bit about how hard it is to break into some of these industries. And she got close. She didn't quite get there, and then life intervened and she had to completely abandon it and give it up. And so I just wanted to write a story where what was kind of a triumph for her, and the romantic relationship is important too, although less important to Layla. It was more of the icing on the cake, kind of a compliment to her finding herself again. So it was my pandemic book. It was the one I wrote during the thick of the pandemic, and the story underwent quite a few changes from just outline synopsis stage to the final product. So trying to figure out some of those things in March of 2020 was difficult, but I got through it.
How was it what was it like? What was different about taking music and using it as a tool in the writing of the book? Songs and songwriting and lyrics.
Well, I can't read music and I can't play an instrument. So I knew that I had to do it in a way. Of course, I don't play chess either. So usually I just have to teach myself or learn enough so that I can describe it, or get a subject matter expert that can help me. But um, in this case, I did write songs for the book. I wrote original songs, but that wasn't hard. That's really just a poem. I mean, that wasn't really, it wasn't the lyrics of songwriting that would be difficult for me. It would be actually writing the music, because I, again, don't know how to do that. I can't read it, can't write it. But I just tried to give the musical parts of the book, I tried to link back to something, either a particular song or how she used to feel. The book has a dual timeline, and it's a little bit different than The Girl Who Used to Know, which is also a dual timeline, because in that book, we're getting the dual timeline of Jonathan and Annika when they met in college, and then 10 years later when they reunite. In Heard It in a Love Song, we have dual timelines, but it's Layla and Josh and what their lives were like with their spouses, because the hero of the book, Josh, is also divorced. So we get sort of we get to see what happened that led to both of them leaving their marriages. So for the music, I just kind of use that. A lot of times what Layla was doing in the present, I could link back to a musical memory from the past, and then learn more about her musical capabilities, aspirations, where things went wrong, and how she plans to get back.
It's fascinating to hear about your creative wheels at work. What's coming up next up that prolific production line, so to speak?
I have one turned in and signed off on. It's on its way to copy editing, and we're looking at March of 2024. It was really, really hard. I wanted to go, I don't want to say in a different direction, because all of my books, again, are under the umbrella of contemporary fiction with a happily ever after. But in this one, it's a story about a heroine who has always kind of held the worldview that if you pay attention, the universe will bring you what you need, deliver what you need, put in your path what you should encounter. And she's dealt these two horrendous blows that she didn't see coming, that, the universe, if that's what the universe sent, she's done with this theory. That is not how things worked out. So she embarks on a solo quest. She has discovered geocaching, if you're familiar with that. It's using maps and GPS to look for items that people have buried. And she starts doing that just as a way to she falls into kind of a deep depression. And so on a random hike with a friend, they see somebody geocaching, and she thinks to herself, well, maybe I should do that. I can't figure out what else to do. And so she starts it, and realizes that it gives her a sense of purpose. And so she decides she's going to leave her hometown and go on a week-long solo geocaching vacation to the Pacific Northwest. And she meets somebody literally moments after starting on her quest.
Why is that happy ending so important to you?
I think as a reader, primarily when I read to escape. And I'm somebody who's naturally pretty anxious. So when I read, I don't want to read something that's going to have me just absolutely tied up in knots afterward or feeling anything other than sort of a, okay, that felt good. Everything's happy. And especially, when this is before the pandemic and now post-pandemic, I feel even stronger. There's a lot of strife out there. And when I read, I just want to relax and be comfortable, and I want to be happy. And I want to feel that the ending was satisfying. So even more important than the happily ever after to me is just a satisfying ending that matches everything that we've been told up until that point in the story. Everything as a storyteller that I've tried to convey, by the time the book is over, I want my readers to be really, really happy and satisfied with the ending. So for me, romance is less about some of the tropes, and less about some of the physical characteristics of a hero, I guess. It's more about his head, his brain. I really enjoy that part of the relationship, the intellectual relationship between the two characters. I like watching all of the things that happen that are not romantic, but if you look back on it later, they really were romantic. They're just not maybe the hit you over the head romance beats. I like the subtlety of it, which is probably why my books will always contain happily ever after. I do have some ideas going forward where I want to work on more ensemble stories where the romance becomes more of the B story. So maybe we have not just one single hero and heroine, but maybe we have an ensemble, and maybe one of those characters gets the happily ever after. Because I do have some things I want to experiment with and go in a different direction, but somebody's always going to have an HEA, and it's going to be one of the main characters, if not the main characters.
Do you feel like, from the reader's point of view and the feedback you've gotten, that they like the way your books end as much as you do?
I don't know if I can answer what I think the readers are looking for. Romance readers, especially, really like their romance to have certain elements, and for it to be categorized as a romance, those elements have to be there. We do have to have the heroine and the hero meeting. We have to have, the obstacles. We have to have some form of the third act breakup, or I usually like to do a third act separation versus maybe a third act breakup. But and those are pretty predictable beats. So people who are true hardcore romance readers, they want those beats, and they want them to be very specific and identifiable. I worry sometimes because my romance beats don't always follow those super predictable, necessary beat patterns. Mine are more subtle. I like there to be more of the reader kind of realizing that, okay, the happily ever after didn't just encompass the romantic relationship. It's the heroine getting what she wanted from the beginning, because the heroine's plot arc is very important to me, almost more so than the romantic plot arc of the characters together. So I don't know. I still think if you give readers a satisfying ending that makes sense, that doesn't feel implausible, that the whole entire book has gone in that direction. So when we get there, it's not a surprise. It feels like a very comfortable, oh, okay, yeah, that's exactly how I would expect this to end. So I don't know that I always do please the romance readers, and I don't know that I always please the women's fiction readers, because they might feel there's a little too much romance, whereas the romance readers might feel like there's a little too much women's fiction. But I need both, so that's what I write.
And is it cliche to say you please yourself at the end?
I always please myself. I'm the initial first reader. I'm the alpha reader. I'm telling the story to myself. So I'm always going to write it. I'm never going to be able to, I can't physically write something. I'm not capable of writing something that I don't want to read, or that would end in a different way. And maybe as the years go on and I keep writing, things will shift a little bit. But for right now, I really like the contemporary women's fiction space with that happily ever after.
Tracey, it's been a blast talking today. Thanks so much for taking out time to be on About the Authors TV.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time today.